Escape Your Limits podcast was created as an idea about 6 years ago. I was invited by a good friend of mine, Mr. Rob Moore, who was a guest on our podcast. Recommend you check that out. I used to travel around and I meet a lot of very interesting and exciting people around the world. So the podcast initially was really a way where I could take the best of what I was in a fortunate position to learn about and then share that with a much wider audience. I wanted to create a video this year, but I didn't want to call it the best of. It certainly didn't mean that any guests were particularly better than others. It was really about the subject that we spoke about and how that particular subject we felt would resonate with you who's listening to this at the moment, and hopefully encourage you to maybe absorb some of these ideas and implement them in your life in the year ahead. I'd like to introduce you to our top 10 moments of 2021. The first clip is Mr. Richard Koch. He has written two amazing books that I definitely think you should check out. The first one is the 80-20 Principle. I found this out about Tony Robbins, who did a long talk about it in his Business Mastery, and the power of that principle is just amazing. I'm sure you've heard of the Pareto principle, but if you've not, definitely check out the book because I'm fascinated about it, and it's something that is regularly discussed in our business, from sales and marketing and stock and ordering and all kinds of areas. It's a really a wonderful idea and concept. I'd love to have spent more time with Richard just going through that one particular book, but the interview that we did was about his latest book called Unreasonable Success, where Richard broke down the key things that had made people unreasonably successful. And there was a wide range of people that are in his book, from Adolf Hitler to Madonna, but there were certain traits that were pretty straightforward to apply and to understand and think about how you could use that in your own life. But there's some really interesting information there. It was a great interview, very short, but because I guess I'm a bit of a fan of Mr. Koch and both of his books. Please welcome Mr. Richard Koch. You referred to this in the book about purpose, and I was sort of reading where you referred to sort of having a lot of interest but struggling to find your purpose. And I guess it's something that is very important to have that unreasonable success. Have you found that there's been some lessons from your perspective in trying to kind of find out what that thing is that we're all probably not aware of that we should put more of our effort into?
I don't think you can actually sit down with a piece of paper, or indeed certainly not on a computer screen, and say, well, what is it that I should do? Or you can't even go for a long walk and decide that sort of thing. I think it has to hit you. It has to hit you over the head suddenly. And in order for it to hit you over the head, you have to be listening. And, the greatest step forward in my career was probably when I found out that two of my colleagues in Bain & Company, who were also junior vice presidents of the company, had decided to go off to Boston to talk to Bill Bain. And I didn't know why they'd gone and what was happening. But it suddenly occurred to me that perhaps they had decided to resign. I don't know how I thought that, but it was because their phones were off, I think. And, you never left your phone off, and you never refused to return calls because it might be an important client. So I thought it was very mysterious. And I actually I slept on it, and then I cycled round to the home of one of the two people, and he was a guy called Ian Evans, and he lived in Kew near the River Thames, very nice house. And I banged on the door, and I got no answer at all. And I shouted through a letterbox, Zoe, that was his wife's name, and Ian. And I got no response at all. And then just as I was about to go, Zoe came to the door and said, you better come in. And they told me that they had been to Boston, that they had resigned, that Bill Bain had taken it very badly, that he threatened a lawsuit against them. And they were sort of, absolutely stunned. And I said to them, well, it's funny that you want to set up your own strategy consulting business? Because that's exactly what I want to do. And how about I join forces with you? And they were at such a low ebb that they thought, well, maybe this is not such a bad idea. And for various reasons, the lawyers said, no, go away. Got a difficult job dealing with Bill Bain with two of us, and then we don't want three. But very soon afterwards, we did join forces and we started. Now, I had a deep desire to own a consulting group. I had a deep desire to actually start a strategy consulting firm. But I didn't know how to do it. And then suddenly it happened, that I was sort of listening, if you like, to the slightest clue as to what it was that I should do. And I think if you've got a very, very strong desire to do something and you keep that in the back of your mind, then you can be aware of a possibility of a transformation which you wouldn't otherwise come to. And in my book, Unreasonable Success and How to Achieve It, I discuss how that happened to 20 out of the 20 people in the book in one way or another, that they suddenly realized that they had a transforming experience and they were not the people that they were before, or they suddenly realized what it was that they wanted to do and that they could do, that they saw a path forward. So I think it's really just being open to the clues that they're out there. I mean, it's all about selective attention. I once asked one of my nephews how he managed to hear when his children were very young, when they were in trouble or whatever, and he said it's all selective attention. So most of the time you block out everything that a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old is saying, because good heavens, you don't want to listen to that. But suddenly, if they're in danger or if there's something that's really, really important, you hear it. And I think it's that kind of selective attention that you need in order to be aware of the few times in life when your whole life can turn on a very small coin, on a sixpence, as we'd say in England, in the days we had sixpences. So it's that combination of extreme desire and openness, because you'll never work out what to do by having, a pen and paper and sort of making a list and say, well, what are the things I'm exceptionally good at doing, and all those conventional things. It won't happen that way.
Do you think that's something to do with you in the book, you reference how you get your unconscious mind to work for you, and sometimes whether you go out for a walk or a workout, you set yourself a puzzle, and then sometimes this comes to you. Do you think some of it is that being conscious and saying, okay, here's what I need to solve, and allowing that time for it to happen? Do you think?
Yes, I think the unconscious mind. I mean, the neuroscientists say that 95%. I don't know how they can possibly calculate this. But 95% of the mind is actually unconscious rather than conscious. And it, I mean, if you're out for a walk and you know the route, well, you're not paying attention to the route. And actually, if you're driving, most of the time you're unconscious as well. It's driving rather than you're driving, which is quite a sobering thought, really. But nevertheless, if you're open to the unconscious mind, I mean, one of the things that has been proven is if you have a difficult problem, the last thing that you should do is try and solve it late at night, particularly if you're reading your emails and going through it, and oh God, I've got to reply to this email today. I've left it for 3 days or whatever, but it's a difficult problem. Don't, switch the machine off, listen to some music, read something, have a shower, do anything. But just before you go to sleep, think a little bit about this issue, and then just switch off, or just go to sleep anyway. And then you might wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and suddenly find you've got the answer. Or you might wake up, hopefully, at 7 o'clock in the morning and find you've got the answer. It's very inconvenient to have it at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But, it will get sorted, because the unconscious mind is busy rearranging the patterns of your life and trying to find an answer for you. And if you sleep on it, it's a good old piece of folk wisdom before they even knew what the unconscious mind was. Then you're likely to do that. So use your unconscious mind. Yes, definitely.
The next clip is Mr. Angel Banos. For those of you that are part of the fitness industry will know this gentleman extremely well. He's someone that I've got to know since I moved to America 4 years ago, and have had the pleasure of working with him quite closely over the last 2 years. And I think I interviewed him actually 4 years ago when he was one of our earlier guests. I meet a lot of people, and my first impression of him was he was a very tough businessman, tough negotiator, but he'd had success, but I didn't really appreciate how great this guy was until I watched him steer his business through the pandemic. And I spent a lot of time in this, in this gentleman's house and seen what he's achieved, and he's achieved more than most people. And he probably, as he was going into the pandemic, he probably didn't really need to even get his hands dirty. He was at a stage and age in his life where he's like, look, I can check out, I'm done. But this guy just turned up the volume, and he was in there every day, and we happened to be doing a project together, so I saw firsthand what he was like, his attitude. And then interviewing him in the second time, I was just so impressed with this guy. And so I've developed a great friendship with him. And the reason that we've put this clip together is because I think his ideas about and his personal motivation, even at the stage of a career he's in today, and his ideas around visualizing what he wants, combined with his application and his ability to take action, was really something that touched me personally. And I'd recommend listening to the whole interview if you've not listened to it. And I think this is a wonderful clip and a wonderful technique that I need to probably do a little bit more in my life as well. So please have a listen to this clip from Mr. Angel Banos. Do you have any, whether you call it goals or times in the month or year, where you kind of assess your relationships and your fitness and your business? Do you kind of have things that you're like, look, this is where I want to be, and I'm going to sort of check in and see how I'm doing, or do you just do that mentally?
Yeah, no, we call it shaking the tree.
Shaking the tree.
Shaking the tree. June and December. Those are always the 2 months. I mean, you're getting into the new year in December. It's a good time to evaluate sort of where you're going to go and what you want to do. At least that's what I do. Mm-hmm. And in June, mid-year, is also a good time to look at the situation, getting right into the summertime and, past the first half. So you're in the second, you're in halftime, mm-hmm. as they say in football. And, and it's time to reevaluate. And I always think, like, no matter how bad things can get, you always have a chance. I mean, God, remember the New England Patriots and the Atlanta Falcons? I think New England came in into the locker room halftime 28-3, losing the game against the Falcons. And they came back and won the game in the second half. So, you can always recoup. You can always do something better. Believe me, we can come up with a shit list all day long on the stuff that's going wrong. But we got to look also at the glass, half full, and see what we're doing right, and exacerbate that and fix the stuff that's it's not going right, or maybe just not even do them anymore at all. Just get rid of them. You know what I'm saying? There's no need for certain stuff in your life anymore. You carry so much, and that's why simplicity, mm-hmm. for me right now, it's my goal with everything.
So when you do those shaking the trees, then is that something you do over a period of time, or is it a day that you do that? How much time do you?
Yeah, it's usually a month process.
Okay.
I start evaluating. We start writing things down, mm-hmm. Personally, on a personal level, and then I start going into my my professional world, and then I involve my brother very much into this process, and my higher teams when it comes to the professional part, my family, mm-hmm. Where we all want to sit with each other and sit for each other, and the goals may be different. I may want to align on a certain path, and my daughter who's 30 or my son who's 24, they're in a different path, many times with the whole thing. I get stubborn about it, but I got to let go, and they got to do what they got to do. But, it's good to communicate about it. At least, full disclosure on where, we want to take our lives is really an important factor, because the last thing you want to do is create resentment. To me, a life of resentment, I'd rather, to me, no resentment is everything. And that's why I like to communicate about, certain things.
It seems like communication is important to you. You've given several examples of where you do that. Is that something where you kind of like plan to make sure that there is no misunderstandings, there is clear communications? Is that again like the simplicity and focusing on the staff and the team and the customers? Is that communication a key part of what you do as a CEO as well?
Yeah, you try. I mean, obviously, communication, there was a book my wife gave me years ago called The Love Languages, and somebody's saying red and I think they're saying blue. It's like, it's really important on communication. You got to be so clear on what you really mean and say. But yeah, I mean, I think that what you're saying about, how to communicate and how do people listen. Some people like to communicate on email. Some people like to communicate verbally. Some people like to communicate written. I mean, it's a different, everybody's got their own radar screen on the way they see the ocean, what I'm saying? So the question is, how are you going to manifest their language to understand exactly what you're saying? And even it could even be generations. The millennial or young, my son communicates different than I do. He sees things different that I'm thinking I'm making very common sense, and he thinks I'm nuts. What? And that could happen on the team level. It could happen, professionally. It could happen, and yeah. So I think clear, concise communication, is important, especially with big things. Sometimes I even ask, repeat it back to me, to make sure you got it. It's really, really important. But we're all on the fast. We're all texting. We're all doing things that could be, misconstrued or just devalued because it's just not being spoken in the right language.
My next clip is with Mr. Bedros Keuilian, one of the guys that has a very large business within the fitness industry, but surprisingly doesn't appear on any fitness industry reports, doesn't get talked about, isn't really acknowledged, which is quite strange when you actually see how well the businesses are that this gentleman's running. And for someone that came across as an immigrant with absolutely nothing and had a huge amount of struggles in his life and has achieved amazing personal success and business success. But when I actually met him, met the people that work for him, saw the level of detail and care that he gave to me and the people that worked for me when I was interacting him, was just absolutely inspiring. And after the short time that I'd spent with him, I really could understand why he'd been the success he has been. Now, that certainly wasn't something that he was born with. It was something that he'd consistently and religiously created. He'd built and created this version of himself, which is who he is today, and that takes a lot of doing when you've been through a lot of the things that this gentleman has. But he's certainly an extraordinary character. I really don't understand why he's not on the top 10 fastest growing franchises in the company. His approach to the pandemic being closed down, his transition to digital, his approach to retention, motivation, everything that the traditional fitness industry struggles with, this guy has got dialed in. And so if you don't know anything about him or his businesses, I would certainly recommend checking him out. He's got his own podcast. He does a ton of stuff on YouTube, and there's plenty of information out there about him. But great story, great philosophy around business and some wonderful skills that anyone that's running a fitness business could certainly learn from. So please enjoy this clip with Mr. Bedros Keuilian. I think a bit that's worth touching on is that, you know, you weren't born here. This isn't your first language. And it was pretty tough to get to where you were. You didn't have, your parents weren't, well, there you go, there's a check, you know, go and build a big fitness change. You know, give us a little bit of a background on kind of how you ended up in America.
Yeah. So, do you know who Mark Divine is?
I don't know.
Okay, so Mark Divine lives in San Diego. He runs a business called SEAL Fit. He's authored 3 or 4 books, great, and he's a former Navy SEAL commander, so definitely high up there. He's retired now from the Navy SEAL program, and he was over at our house for dinner on Saturday, he and his wife, Sandy, and he's like, man, you know, so tell me more about you. Like, you're an immigrant to this country from a communist country. He goes, but that's about all I know. I was like, Mark, I used to think I was just a regular immigrant to this country, and so in 1980, my dad decides that we're going to escape Armenia, which was at the time under Soviet rule, and we, of course, wanted to come to the United States, but since it's communism and the Soviet Union would never allow us to come to the United States, we had to lie and say we're going on a vacation to Italy, because Italy was, you know, sympathetic to communism. And so, of course, we never came back from the vacation to Italy. We went to the American consul once we were in Rome, Italy, and we said, hey, we're political refugees. My dad said, he said, I'm a Communist Party member, and I denounce communism, and I want to enter the United States legally. So we did. And when you enter a country and you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture, Matthew, it's a very massive culture shock. It's not like today where I can take me and my family to Japan and I can speak into my phone and Google will translate into Japanese. The way I described it to my son, who's 15, because he was sitting at the dinner table, and I don't normally share a lot of my upbringing experiences with my kids unless they ask. And so they were just sitting at the table and Mark Divine was asking. So I go, son, it would be like if we went to Mars and we don't speak Martian, we don't understand their culture, we don't understand how to fly a flying saucer, and we have to learn that, right? It would be that, the equivalent of that when we came to the United States. But the adversity that we dealt with and the setbacks, I guess, really the suffering. I mean, there's no other way to say it other than the suffering. There was like the physical, emotional, mental suffering. When you're living in Section 8 housing and you're being beat up and bullied, and you know, I just put up a post today on Instagram, and one of the apartment complexes were so filthy, I got lice, and my parents couldn't afford lice treatment, so my mom asked my dad to siphon out gasoline from a parked car, and she washed my hair with gasoline. Like, that's, you know, and then my dad found a dumpster behind a grocery store, and he realized they throw away food that is still edible, even though it might have a little bit of mold on it or whatever. You can just pick off the mold and eat it. And we were eating that. And but to me, that's all I knew. And so I just assumed maybe all immigrants go through this. And so as I'm telling all these stories to Mark Divine, his jaw has dropped. And he's like, what the hell? I go, but all this adversity and setback and suffering that we experienced has taught me to be resilient and resourceful. And today, that's my superpower for being able to not only stay in business during this COVID pandemic, but to keep growing my business during this pandemic. And so, you know, the strangest things that you would be grateful for, I am grateful for the worst, suckiest, absolutely most painful childhood ever, because it is a superpower that's allowed me to be resourceful and resilient and relentless in my pursuit of my outcome. Yeah.
I've heard a story when you spoke about when you came here, and there was the sort of area where a lot of the Armenian people went to live. And you also heard you give the example as of where you have like Little Italy and Chinatown and that, but your parents sort of purposely decided not to go where anyone else. Tell that story, and also explain, you know, how that relates to, I guess, the comfort zone that a lot of us get into, whether it's going into a new company or trying to find a new opportunity. Because I think it was a very interesting observation that you made when you came here.
Yeah, so here in California, like every state has a Little Italy or Chinatown or whatever, right? And so here in California, Little Armenia is in Glendale, California, near Los Angeles. And even in 1980, when we immigrated here, everyone spoke Armenian, and there's a lot of Armenian stores and Armenian culture. My dad decided that we're going to stay in the Anaheim area where there is 0 Armenians. And he said, you're going to learn the language, you're going to assimilate, you're going to lose your accent and become American. And I think it was the most progressive, forward-thinking thing a foreigner can do. Instead of putting his family into what would have otherwise been a very familiar and comfortable environment, Glendale, where there's other Armenians, and then we could kind of learn the culture of the American way, but still interact with Armenians. It was like being thrown in the deep end and saying, son, daughter, learn to swim because you're going to drown. And I think that was a really neat thing to do. And boy, has it certainly forced us out of our comfort zone. I mean, listen, when you're sitting in kindergarten, one of the stories I could tell you, when you're sitting in kindergarten and you're wearing clothes that your mom made you, and you've got a funny bowl haircut, and you have to go pee, and you're trying to tell the teacher you have to go pee, but you can't speak, but you know where the restroom is. And so I got up, and it was those little taped off areas, little squares on the ground for kids to sit on. And the teacher was like writing something. So I got up and I started walking towards the bathroom, and she yelled at me. Now, I don't know what she said, but I sat back down because I knew it was, hey, get back to your seat. And so I just peed myself, right? Because I got to pee, I'm a kid. And of course, all the other kids begin to laugh at you and bully you. That begins to put you way out of your comfort zone. I'm not saying you should put your kid in that environment. You shouldn't. But I'm grateful that I was inadvertently put into that environment, because it put me so far out of my comfort zone that there's not a thing that you could do to me to frazzle me now, to make me feel uncomfortable. I might do something that I'm unfamiliar with, but I will do it with enthusiasm, and I will ask you to coach me and teach me how to do it right, because I've just been put in so many uncomfortable positions as a byproduct of being an immigrant to a country where my dad decided to leave us in the most American town of all, literally Disneyland. Like Main Street, USA was probably 5 minutes away from the apartments that we lived at. And so it's again, another superpower was gained through that experience. And now, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a market sophistication, whatever happens, whether it's a new competitor comes out in my industry that's just fully funded by private equity, I just don't get frazzled. And it's a byproduct of constantly having been out of my comfort zone as a child. Now, has that left traumatic marks on me? Absolutely. And have I gone to a therapist to deal with that? Yes, every Monday for 16 months. And Joan here could be my witness to that. But with every adversity, there's a seed of opportunity and growth, as Napoleon Hill says. And I've had the good fortune to deal with a massive amount of adversity early on in my life.
My next guest is Dr. Stephanie Estima. This was a very interesting interview for me because it really helped me understand that my perception of the world, of the fitness industry, about diet and nutrition was very much a male-dominated, a male perspective. And upon researching for this interview, typical guy, I realized that actually men are quite different than women. And it really sort of slapped me on the nose to realize that a lot of businesses, fitness businesses, nutrition companies, diet companies, etc., are created by men. And as a male with a daughter, it really got me to think differently about how we communicate and understand that there is a big difference between women. You know, what they eat, when they eat, the timings, how they train, the type of exercises you do at a certain time. All of this is not discussed in the industry as a whole. And it's probably no wonder that we're not doing as good a job as what we could do for targeting different demographics. So I really had to learn a lot, and I learned a lot from talking to this lady. And I suppose one of the takeaways from me is that as a business and in leadership teams, you really need to have diversity. In particular, as a real start, is more women in the decision-making process. Because particularly if you're in a business that caters for women, if it's a male-dominated business, then maybe it's different. But if you have a mixture of people that you're trying to attract, then you definitely need a real genuine balance on the board. And if you listen to this interview, it will really kind of explain why I say what I'm saying. Wonderful lady, extremely talented, extremely driven, and has some fantastic information to share that I'd recommend that you spend some time understanding a little bit more about her. So please enjoy this clip with Miss Stephanie Estima. So I've listened to a few of your own podcasts, and I know, including what I've read, and we talk about sex and a lot of the things that we've discussed, including sleep and working out and mental health, seem to have a huge impact with it. And although it's probably not something that people talk about a lot, it's probably something that people struggle with on a number of levels because they've not got all of the other things in place, such as their rest, their sleep, their recovery, etc. Yeah. I guess, whether it's male or female, in order to sort of be optimal in terms of your own wellness and health, what are some of the things that you've found are important to prioritize as it relates to getting that balance right in your life?
I'm so happy you asked this question, because I think a lot of people shy away from it, because it was a really big chapter in the book. And what I would absolutely love is, obviously once there's rapport between a patient and a doctor, for us to really be destigmatizing and talking about some of the benefits that having a healthy, active sex life can confer. So when we think about, and specifically, when we talk about sex, and orgasming, there's a couple of things that are really important to consider here. One is that you are essentially bathing your brain in all of these neurochemicals that are so positive for you. So you have the dopamine, the expectation, kind of beforehand. And then, afterwards you feel, dopamine and serotonin sort of exist on a kind of a continuum. So we have like the super alert, like really looking forward to something, which is the dopamine. So like maybe that's date night with your partner, or that, you're looking forward to spending time with someone. And then connection, the connection that you experience. And of course, we're assuming that this is all consensual and, done in a safe way. And, it's something that both parties want. But that when you are with someone in a sexual capacity, this is one of the times where we are the most vulnerable, we are the most open, and to share that experience with someone, to share fluids. Like this is such a sacred act. And when we think about the neurotransmitters, like some of the benefits of it, of course, we see floods and floods of oxytocin, in that post-orgasm time, which is going to confer more bonding and more feelings of bliss. It's going to help you feel blissed out. And then that serotonin is going to help you feel like content, right? So where the dopamine is like more of the seeking and the hunting and the getting, the serotonin is like, I'm really happy with where I am right now. I feel really good in my body. I feel really good of where I am. So you're dosing all of these things, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, of course, all the endorphins that go with it as well. And then from a physiological standpoint, when you see some of the benefits that having a regular sex life and orgasming, on a regular basis can confer, we see things like lowered heart rate. We see things like improved blood pressure. We see improved respiratory rate. So your breathing will slow down. You're not like breathing from some of these accessory muscles in the upper part of the chest, but you're more your diaphragmatic breathing. We also see things like heart rate variability, which is distinct from heart rate. You mentioned the Oura ring. I'm also wearing one as well. Your heart rate variability is basically a measure of your sympathetic and parasympathetic tone. Now, we haven't mentioned those two terms yet, but those are basically branches of the nervous system. Your sympathetic is your fight, flight, freeze. It's like the stress system. And the parasympathetic is the rest, digest, stay, and play. And your heart rate variability, you want more variability. Like you don't want your heart to beat literally every second on the second. You want there to be some variability there because that tells you, the heart has these two inputs to it, has sympathetic and parasympathetic. You want those to almost be like competing with each other. So you want that variability in your heart rate. So we see all of these things, and then not even talking about like how, your frontal lobe lights up. We have all like the activation and the connectivity in the brain is amplified as well. So, and like, let's just be on like, engaging, like having sex and this is like part of our human design. Like we are designed to do this, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that it's really important that we start thinking about, teaching our young boys and our young girls, obviously you have to do this in an age appropriate way, but like the sacredness of this act, like how important this actually is. And, I can speak from my own experience. I grew up in a very, grew up Roman Catholic and, going to school, I remember thinking like, oh my God, I can like get into a pool and I can get pregnant. Like I had no idea how my fertility, like no idea about my fertility cycle, no idea about sexuality and sensuality. It was viewed as this thing that was unimportant until you got married. And I think that if we can start having this conversation, not only with ourselves, but, for our children, right? Like to teach them about, the sacredness of this and some of the physiological benefits, to be able to speak to that, I think is really important. So I talk a lot about the different phases of orgasms in the book, to vibrate or not to vibrate for women, and the use of vibrators, which big fan, but you also want to be thinking about how you can and you don't need to, and I should also just pre-frame and say that you don't need to have a partner for an orgasm, right? You can have sex with yourself. There can be your hands, you can have vibrators, you can have all the toys. So I think that there's really no excuse, if you will, to not be thinking about this as a health practice as well. And in the book, I wrote about, the data, which suggests that around a minimum of once a week, but ideally closer to twice a week in terms of having, regular engaging in that either connection with yourself or connection with your partner is important.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, not to be too prescriptive, but the dosing. So that's about once to twice a week is where you'll get those health benefits. Is that right?
Yeah, as a minimum. Yeah, and then you can just go up from there.
Fantastic. Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview. So my next guest is Mr. Eric, the trainer. He was very different to what I expected. One of the first things I noticed when I saw him was this crazy energy. And when I prepared for the interview, I was trying to figure out how this guy had managed to train so many of some of the biggest celebrities and actors in the world. It was just the list of people that he'd worked with, rock stars and people he'd been on tour with was absolutely incredible. But when you saw this guy's energy and this guy's approach to health and fitness, it was truly infectious. So I was very inspired after sitting down with him. He created a comic book exercise. It was an exercise and training book that had all these characters that was drawn out as it was an actual comic book, and lovely piece of work that he created there. But the thing that I suppose I didn't really understand is that there's regular trainers that sort of get you ready for an event or just try and get you fit in general for life. But there's but there's the type of training that these celebrity trainers do, where they're contacted by a movie studio or a particular celebrity, and they need to get this person to look like that character in an extremely short space of time. And I'd never really heard about that or understood how that could be done, but he had some fantastic techniques about changing people's body shape, emphasizing different muscle parts and slimming down the waist and changing the shape of the shoulders and the hips and a number of things that were very interesting to me in order to sort of create these quick results. So he'd also studied a lot from the bodybuilding world and how you stand differently can affect your shape and your look. It was a very interesting interview because I thought I knew a lot about fitness and training, and this guy certainly opened up a very different area to what I wasn't aware of. And it also got me to think about when people are trying to get in shape, even though they're not trying to do it necessarily in 30 days for a movie, but it taught me a lot about training and about muscle building, whether it's on men and women, and a lot of the exercises that you see on the internet and on YouTube and exercises that people don't necessarily build a body in the shape that you want. And I think people like Eric have got this real gift of understanding general fitness. He understands general fitness, but what he also does is understand how to, once you've got that basic level of fitness, how to actually build a particular body shape that's going to look good in a dress, it's going to look good in a pair of jeans, going to look good in a short top, and be able to sort of almost like mold and shape and sculpture the body you want by certain types of strength training. So very impressed with the guy. Check out the interview with Mr. Eric, the trainer.
Jet reps are limited range of motion repetitions that divorce the secondary muscle from the exercise. And I'll give you an example. If I were lifting a weight doing a shoulder press, and I were to call out the muscle that's working, so from here to here, deltoid, 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 and what about from here up? Tricep, 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 tricep. So the question is, if my goal is strategic blood delivery, and I want to pump up your deltoids, why not tell the tricep to sit down and relax for a while? Why not stay within the deltoid itself and allow the tricep to not work and really drive all that nutrient-rich blood into the primary muscle? It's kind of exciting. You do the exercise using jet reps or full range of motion or whatever, and then afterwards, you're not done with the set yet. You employ the engorge phase, and that is where you summon nutrient-rich blood to the muscle directly. So let's say I'm doing a set of jet rep bicep curls, and I'm coming up and down, and I'm touching here. So I'm not going all the way down. I'm just doing a partial range of motion. These are jet reps. Notice my elbow point is behind me. As I squeeze at the top, my elbow point comes in front. So it's really working the front of the shoulder and the bicep specifically. But then when I put the weight down, boom, I hit a double bicep pose and I hold as hard as I can for 10 seconds. Because if you watch Pumping Iron, notice those guys used to work out really hard for an hour and a half, but then they would go into a posing room covered in mirrors and they would pose for another hour or an hour and a half, and that's why they look so good. We don't have time to do that in today's crazy society with cell phones and meetings and intercontinental flights. So we actually put that process in the workout. So first we do the exercise, boom, then we do the engorge phase, we hold for 10 seconds, and it summons all that nutrient-rich blood directly into the muscle that you're asking it. You're literally asking it to change.
My next guest is Mr. Chris Voss. Now, I am passionate about sales and negotiation, and this guy is absolutely the best there is. Former FBI chief hostage negotiator. He's been in some of the toughest situations that you could ever imagine. We covered a very small part of what he'd been involved in on his interview. I certainly recommend checking out some of the stuff he's done, reading his book, looking at some of his YouTube interviews. But some of the techniques that he uses are absolutely fascinating. I've used a number of the techniques that he's taught me in business situations, and the results have been quite profound. But one of the key things that he taught me in negotiation, his book is called Never Split the Difference, And, I've always thought about in any negotiation, you want a win-win situation. And he kind of debunks that myth. But what he does do on a really, really high level is explains the benefit of, in any negotiation, you want to create a repeat customer. And so I suppose on a low level, the tactics are never split the difference. But on a very, very high level, his whole goal is to create a situation where you're going to develop a relationship with someone that's going to keep coming back to you, even in a hostage situation. And he explains how and why that happens. So I think this guy is fantastic. I could talk to him for absolutely hours. He's the sort of person that you want to kind of open a few really, really good bottles of wine with and hear the stories that he's got to tell. So please enjoy this clip from Mr. Chris Voss, former chief FBI negotiator. I like what you've said is, I can't remember the term you just used, but like the trust-based influence.
Trust-based influence.
Yeah, it is being honest, but it's probably being honest in a way where you're not letting your emotions get the better of you.
Yep.
Because they shouldn't be getting the better of you, which is kind of it's almost like two opposites working. But yes, yeah. It's an interesting sort of distinction, and that was kind of leading me on to, because I was, I think some people think negotiation and influence is manipulation, and how would you separate the two in terms of what you do, which is this trust-based influence, and actually trying to manipulate somebody for your own gains, which I guess could be tempting when you're trying to deal with a terrorist that's going to kill people.
Well, and the very last thing you said is a real critical distinction when you said for your own gains. So these influence tools are just tools. What they're being used for, am I using it at your expense? That's manipulation. Am I using it so we both prosper? That's influence. For example, we say lying is bad, and I believe lying is bad. However, if I say, look, you and I are going to dinner. On the way to dinner, we got to stop by my house. I got something I want to pick up. Why don't you come inside with me for just a second? And then we're going to dinner. We step in the front door and 70 people jump out and yell to you, surprise, it's your birthday. It's a party in honor of you, to celebrate you. Now, I lied to you. But I was for your gain. Now, most people tell lies to protect themselves because they don't know how to tell the truth. Vast majority of lies, even white lies, the classic, you got a significant other and they put on an outfit and they say, does this make me look fat? You're going to lie to save yourself. You ain't lying to protect them. You're lying to protect yourself. So what's the tool being used for? And again, I'm not an advocate of lying, but the point I'm trying to make is my communication is designed only for my benefit. That's manipulation. That's a bad thing. If it's for both our benefit and your benefiting, now we're talking about influence. Now I'm looking out for you. So it's all in what the tools are being used for.
Yeah. Which kind of comes back to that point you made, we talked about at the beginning, which is the long-term relationship and the collaboration. Right. Revert back to the beginning on those ones. So in terms of lying, then how do you spot a liar or someone who's probably not being truthful? Are there? I guess that's something you probably have to pick up in these situations, or have had to pick up. Are there sort of clues that you can use to figure that out and know how to respond?
Yeah, well, what are the tells, right? Everybody wants to know tells, like the poker term. What are the tells of lying? Well, here's how a polygraph works. A polygraph is a lie detection machine. What it really does is it lays down your baseline of truth telling. If you tell the truth, and you might not, but if you do, you tell the truth one way, or when you tell the truth, you tell it the same way every time. I can remember a long time ago, we're interviewing literally a terrorist negotiator who'd we'd arrested in a bombing plot. and we debriefed the guy for weeks. Now, he told us a whole bunch of stories a different way every time. Like, this dude is lying. And when we finally confronted him over it, there was one story that he told us every time. He said, you know, he's referred to some other guys. He happened to be in Jersey, the other terrorist cell in Brooklyn. He asked an intermediary about the guys in Brooklyn, and the intermediary said, okay, well, you could talk to him. He said, but don't give him your neck. And every time he told us that story, he told it exactly like that. Plus, he made the same movement. He told the truth the same way every time. Now, you might lie 7 different ways, but when you tell the truth, you tell it one way. So first of all, when you're interacting with someone, small talk, like, hey, how was traffic today? You know, where'd you come in from? What'd you have for breakfast? Small talk, if you're paying attention, is how you lay down whether or not they're telling you the truth. They say, yeah, traffic wasn't too bad. They talk about traffic. They talk about breakfast. They talk about where they're from the same way every time. Now you got a baseline of truth telling. When they lie, it could be one of 7 ways. They could look down. They could look up. They could hold their breath. They could say, well, to be honest, whatever their variety of tells, all you know is that they came out of their one way of truth telling. Your gut instinct will start to pick this up. Gut instinct is actually a supercomputer. You feel alarm bells going off on the other side. Ask yourself what's causing those to go off. You're probably picking up deception from the other side. You don't confront them on it. You just now realize that you've made yourself smarter. You understand who you're really talking to.
My next guest, or my next clip, is with Mr. Troy Casey. And this is a particularly memorable interview with Scott, who's sitting behind the camera today, and myself, because we'd just invested a significant amount of money in some wonderful camera equipment, and we'd spent quite a lot of time trying to get Mr. Casey, and we'd agreed to meet down in Santa Monica in a hotel. And we got there, and it was a blazing hot summer day, and Troy was out there giving out his pamphlets in the middle of this sort of green area next to Santa Monica Pier. For those of you who have ever been there, you can see it's quite a chaotic area with all kinds of interesting people walking around. And I said, okay, so where are we doing the interview? And he said, well, we can do it on the beach. So there was no hotel as we kind of thought there was. It was just the beach. Now, having camera equipment and sand, particularly very expensive camera equipment, doesn't go very well. So my cameraman was panicking what damage this was going to do with our brand new equipment, and I was kind of panicking, thinking we were going to sit in the middle of a desert for about 2 hours, and I was going to get absolutely frazzled. So we decided to do it because it was we didn't have a podcast for Monday, and it was Friday afternoon, so it was a pretty quick turnaround. So we walked to the middle of the beach, trying to find somewhere where there wasn't too many people, and we sat down. And I realized I'm going to absolutely burn the skin off the top of my head. So I talked Kay into I talked Troy into giving me his kind of very sweaty cap to put on my head to prevent me from being burnt. And I kind of knew a little bit about Troy, but I didn't fully expect the conversation to go exactly how it did. So I'll let you listen to the clip, but certainly a very entertaining guy, got some very interesting views on life and health, had a fantastic story about being an ex-Versace model and some of the parties that he used to get up to in Milan. So it was a wonderful story, very interesting guy, and I hope you enjoy this clip with Mr. Troy Casey.
I've been drinking my own urine for 17 years. I resonated with the information, I tried it, and then a couple years ago, one of my friends educated me even more on it. It's an ancient Ayurvedic practice. It has stem cells, free stem cells, right? Oh. So stem cells, amino acids, antibodies. It's the hair of the dog. Whatever's going on inside you, it's a direct neurofeedback, biofeedback loop. You know what's wrong with you as soon as you drink your morning pee. Ooh, too much salt, too much caffeine. And so it's a direct feedback loop. Topically, aged urine is the fountain of youth for sure. Anally, I used it rectally for aged urine enemas, and parasites came out of me, flukes out of my liver. That's how I got that's one of the ways that I got my stomach so flat. And my journey, as I explained in the book, your curse is your gift. There's two forces guiding us on this planet, yin and yang. I was cursed or gifted with gut dysfunction. And, you know, after 30 years or 25 years of research, I really started to get it online, and aged urine enemas and breath work really helped get my six-pack abs.
My next guest is Mr. John Jaquish. He was a very interesting guest to talk to, because if you look and follow him on social media, he's a little bit like Marmite. People either love him or hate him. I was very interested because I've been working out, I've been bodybuilding for many years, and I there was definitely something there about what he was talking about, but he seemed to absolutely annoy so many people with some of his ideas and philosophies. And my goal in the interview is to really understand, you know, was this guy legit? Was what he was talking about, did it make sense? And so I went in there with an open mind, and he invited me up to his beautiful penthouse in San Francisco to actually do a workout and to explain to me how his product worked. So one of the reasons I've got this in here is that what he did say did work. I think people misunderstand his message, and they don't necessarily hear everything that he says. You know, I think a lot of people hear what they want him to say. But I certainly changed my training quite significantly after spending some time with him. I understand how to really make the most out of developing muscle, which is something a guy in his 50s, it's important for me to maintain a certain element of muscle mass. And through learning from him, I found a much more effective and efficient way of actually achieving that. Not necessarily just through his X-bar, but a slightly different way of training. So I'd recommend you checking this guy out and, you know, look through some of the marketing or try and see through some of the marketing message to really grasp on a lot of the science that he spent a huge amount of time researching. And, you know, I've certainly been following his methods for quite a while now and been getting some fantastic results in a relatively short space of time. So please check out the interview with Mr. John Jaquish. So in terms of coming back to the workout part, like you mentioned that you can actually do this band training in about 10 minutes a day, which seems quite a short amount of time. I know you can get tough workouts and that, but you know, what's the sort of basis of being able to, like, you're pretty buff, and you're not 25 years old either. I guess 26, is that right? Sure. So are you getting that from, you know, just the band? I'll use band training because I don't want this to seem as though we're just sort of pushing a particular thing, but are you getting that from training out in this particular way?
Yeah, I train with remember, you can't train with bands, because bands, if you get heavy enough for them to be relevant to strength, they will twist your joints and injure you. So bands by themselves are worthless. So you have to have the Olympic bar, and you have to have the plate that keeps your ankles from being twisted. So the whole idea of the product is really protecting the smaller joints of the body, and then putting tremendous loads through the body, because the body can handle it in the specific positions. So I started using X3 after I turned 40, and I'm 44 now. So I have put on 60 pounds of muscle since then. So in 4 years, I'm completely different. Yeah. And I was kind of chubby when I started. I was 16% body fat. And I was working out, but I was using weights, and, you know, like, I'm also bothered in general, and the back cover of the book hits on this, and I have references in the book that really look at, like, how fit do people get with standard fitness? And I think that's a great starting point for a conversation about a new idea. So people seem to be very closed off to the new idea. But who's really fit? You're fit. I'm fit. But I don't know what gym you go to. We're in Orange County, so you got a couple gyms here that have some pretty athletic people. But let's go to Wichita. Go to the Planet Fitness there. The people that are in the gym are no different than the people that are at the Pizza Hut next door. Not at all. And that is almost every gym in the world.
Is that more like your view of it when you've traveled around these places, or?
No, there's data on this.
Right.
So the leanest, best 1 percentile of males in the United States has 10.9% body fat. That's pathetic. That's almost like, that's not even visible abs. Maybe just the top, a little outline. But that's just pathetic. That's the best 1%. And that percentage body fat takes muscularity into consideration too. It's not just like, whatever, how good your diet is. So really, and here's another statistic for you. 1 in 6 males in the United States have used or are currently using anabolic steroids. 1 in 6. 1 in 6.
Of what age group is that?
Over 18.
Over 18?
Just over 18.
1 in 6.
So are 1 in 6 people super fit? No, not even close. I mean, go to the shopping mall, look around. There might be 1,000 people you see when you walk through a shopping mall. So that fit number, we're just talking males here. It's not 1 in 6, is it 1 in 600? No. Is it 1 in 6,000? Maybe more like 1 in 60,000 people are really in exceptionally good shape. So why the hell do we care what they're doing? They're clearly genetic outliers, and that whatever they're doing does not apply to the rest of us.
Right.
And also, in the last chapter of the book, I explain what the genetic differences are. Did you read that chapter?
No.
That chapter's a bitch. So I can imagine, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of science here. It's just tedious, but it's worth it. That last chapter, read that chapter.
So give us a sort of a
rundown of that
rough summary of it.
The biggest difference between the people who put on muscle easily and become strength athletes and those who don't is where their tendons attach to the bone that moves.
So it's genetic.
From the core of the body. So, like for example, everybody has a sternum attachment to the pectoral, right? And then your pectoral attaches somewhere, usually right here, before the beginning of the bicep. And the object of the pectoral is moving that bone, that humerus bone, towards the body. So even when I go cross body, I can feel, the thickness getting greater because the muscles are getting shorter and those cells are pulling together. Now, what if we had an individual that instead, here, I'll use this arm so the camera can definitely see it. So instead of having an insertion here, the insertion is on the other end of the bone by the elbow. So the people that have this mutation, they have more leverage when they're in the weaker range of motion. So they have a stronger, weaker range. So they can always engage more in the weaker range. So it's almost like everything they do is using X3. Right? Because
so just
they're
so I
almost
get my head around
offloading
that.
or engaging more in that weaker range.
So people who are in the sort of more muscular section have got longer
longer moment arms.
Longer in their arms. People who are not as muscular are shorter. So if it's shorter, it's better to train in the way you're talking about than, is that?
It's better so there's 16 now NFL players I'm working with. It's better for everybody to use X3. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not just promoting my product. I mean, it's just a fact. Like the strongest level of variable resistance, and there could be some other approach at some point, but there isn't now. Everybody's doing better. All the NFL players that I'm working with, all the NBA players, the entire Miami Heat, they stopped using weights and they're just using X3 now. And they even endorsed the book and they put the endorsement on the back of the book. Or they gave me permission to do that and use the name of their team. Because usually when you're working with a team, you have to say like a football team that's based in Chicago, but you can't say Chicago Bears. But Miami Heat gave me permission. Because they really like it. It works. It works for the guys. It keeps their guys from getting injured. So and they're stronger than ever.
So just explain me that short thing again. Just so so people who are not as muscular developed have got short. What do they call them?
No. You can't. You're getting. What if somebody doesn't work out and they have the great genetics? So If you have the longer insertion, then you are more likely to be able to build a greater amount of muscle mass.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you will. I mean,
Right.
that guy might.
You've got the potential.
Yeah, that guy might just sit at home and play PlayStation.
So if you've got short ones, then what do? If you've got short ones, it's better to train in this way. Is that than regularly?
It's always better to train in variable resistance in all cases, but so 23% of people are incapable of stimulating any muscular protein synthesis at all. I think that was the second reference in the book.
And why is that?
They can't engage. They can't engage enough muscle to cause fatigue, but they're lifting regular weights. It's different when you're using something that fatigues the entire musculature.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not that one will do better training with variable resistance. Everyone will do better training with variable resistance because the weak range is still the weak range and the strong range is still the strong range. Nobody has it reversed. Some just have more of an advantage when using regular weights, and some have a great disadvantage.
Right.
And so, but yeah, I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter. And so now, with this new approach, everybody can be as strong as that NFL player they like. Now, maybe they don't have the size to be a linebacker, and they look more like a wide receiver. Well, that's still cool. So, like everybody can grow more musculature as a result of this. And especially the majority of the population has that tendon disadvantage.
Right.
And so now we can do it.
Right, so let's give this row a try then. Is that what we're doing next?
Yeah. Actually, let me do a set.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I've got to say about the row. I'll say this before I'm out of breath, because I will be. The row is a very unique moment because the curve of power of the bicep and the lat come together in a weird way where actually the middle is the most powerful position. It's only multi-joint movement of the body where the fully contracted position is not. So the lats work a little differently, and it's mostly because the lats have a different curve. So what I end up doing is only a few repetitions go full, and then I might do 30 mid-range repetitions. So the diminishing range here is super important. And that's how, because we get questions like, well, the curve is different for each exercise. Yeah, we thought of that, and that's part of the programming. There's a whole chapter just on the row in the book and how its curve is so drastically different from almost everything else. I'm just going to pull it up. I'm also going to tip up at a kind of a 45-degree angle, which is something I recommend for people with bad backs. I don't have a bad back, but almost everybody has something with their lower spine. So, like, instead of being just parallel with the ground, 45-degree angle is pretty good.
You're not letting it fully out at the bottom.
No, I never let my arms go straight. So keeping constant tension.
Right, let's give that a go.
Perfect. Yeah.
I can feel that.
Oh yeah.
I can slowly start to sort of feel how it works.
Yeah.
I couldn't get that by looking at just.
Well, so many
really?
people have had so many experiences just grabbing a band at the gym and stepping on it and trying to do a curl, and their wrists are twisting while they're doing it, and they're like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I'll just get some dumbbells.
Yeah.
And I understand I just knew what humans were capable of in the strongest range because of my bone density medical device. So that's how I knew, because I saw little old ladies put 6 times their body weight through their hip joint the first training session because we had just isolated the impact ready range.
Right.
And these are women who had never worked out. They're osteoporotic and they're in their mid-50s. So totally deconditioned by any definition. And they're massively loading the body because they're using a millimeter of range of motion.
Right.
So I'm thinking, if the human body is capable of producing that level of force, well, we don't use it when we work out. So maybe lifting weights is not the answer. Yeah, when you do work with an older person, you gotta totally be mindful of their limitations.
Right.
You know, like for example, when he does a row, he either grabs over the top because he doesn't have the ability to supinate the hand,
Okay.
or he'll use globe grips. You know what globe grips are?
No.
It's a sphere, it's a latex sphere with a slit in it, and then it's got a hole the size of a gauge, an Olympic
Oh,
gauge.
okay, yeah, I know
And so
what
it
you mean,
snaps onto the bar, and so you can adjust your wrist.
Right. And with the muscle building part, have you done any testing to show, like with one, because it feels like I've got quite a pump on with my back, and definitely feel as I've done a good set or a few sets. Have you been able to sort of see what that does in terms of building muscle over time? Has that been researched or?
It's been anything that I do, you know, someone's gonna say like the data was faked or whatever. So like, you know, there's a lot of trolls out there, and so I'd rather somebody else come up with this conclusion. So there's a couple of university trials that we're talking about happening. Also, I think one of the reasons why the fitness industry doesn't read research. I mean, number one, it's hard. You got to be an academic to read academic research, mostly because of the statistical tests. If you don't understand the statistical tests, it's meaningless. The whole paper is meaningless. So, muscle mass is not a thing in medicine. It's like nobody cares. So, and it doesn't solve any problem. Well, we know it kind of does, because a lack of muscle mass, sarcopenia, is an indicator of organ failure, right? So your muscles and your organs have a very symbiotic relationship. Like the more muscle mass you have, the more demand you have on your organs, and that's going to keep you alive longer, which is why one of the greatest indicators of long life is high levels of strength. But they don't say high levels of mass. So it's really, like, you won't find muscle mass, maybe body composition and weight loss studies. That's about all you're going to find about muscle mass in a lot of these studies, because that's what's tested.
My next guest is Mr. Tony Pearson. He was a fan of mine back in the 80s when I used to be, I've said it a number of times, I feel as though I'm repeating myself, but when I was in the bodybuilding space competing, I used to read Flex magazines and Muscle and Fitness, and this guy was always on there. He kind of, they called him the Michael Jackson of bodybuilding. He used to wear these kind of leather jackets, be a great poser, and this kind of long Michael Jackson hair. And I was actually introduced to him, or we were introduced to him by Eric the trainer. And I was in Vegas. He didn't travel a lot. He was training clients in Vegas, and he sort of said, "Look, if you want to interview me, then you've got to come over to Vegas." So I thought I was interviewing an ex-1980s bodybuilder. And what I didn't realize was his story. And he's recently released a book, and he talks about his childhood and what he went through as a kid, and what that experience did to him I suppose to get him to where he was today. And I there was quite a few times when I was preparing for the interview and I read the book and I just had to stop because I just couldn't believe someone had been through what he had done. So he absolutely lovely guy, competed at 60, I believe. I think he won, I believe it was Mr. Universe at 60 years of age, in fantastic shape. Got some great stories, but his background and what he went through, and you know, it kind of made me think when sometimes I have a bad day and I think how bad it is, and I you know, look at people like him and think what they've been through and how they're living their life and making a difference to people. I've got nothing to complain about. So please enjoy this clip with Mr. Tony Pearson.
This is why I'm still at my age, still in there squatting. I don't care if it's a damn bar, I'm going to squat the bar.
Yeah.
Just trying to hold on to the size of the leg. So the more reps, for sure a lot less weight. And locking out. This is so important, guys. Stop locking out. I'm on Facebook, social media, I'm watching all you guys on Instagram. They lock out between every rep. Whatever happened to continuous tension on the muscle? If you apply that, you're going to grow 10 times faster. If you're squatting 145 pounds and you squat parallel to the floor, if you come up too high, you squat, it'll come about that much. It's a very short range of movement. So that tension on your quads is intense.
It's intense.
You do it 15 times, and you do 10 sets of that. Your leg's going to explode when you walk out of the gym. They think when I lock out and squeeze my glutes, you're resting. You're resting. And you're engaging your knees. Every time you lock out, the initial move is your knees. You're engaging your joints. So when you don't lock out, you're saving your joints.
Right. What about leg press? Are you a believer in that?
Leg press is really good. I stopped leg pressing because my guy advised me to, because my back was a mess at the end. So I haven't. But when you leg press, same thing. Don't lock out, and you don't need 1,000 pounds to build the legs. You just don't. It's all show. You put 500 pounds in there, and what I would do leg extensions, do some sumo squats, and then go leg press. So you do maybe 4 or 5 sets, maybe 4 plates on each side, max. 10, 12 reps, but don't lock out. And do it slow. I see the guys, the weight's falling and all this weight come. Where's the mind connection? So everything you do has to be slow and controlled. I had some clients come to me and they walk away and goes, because your training is too slow, they said. And it's boring, it's not exciting. I go, okay. And they leave. They don't understand it. But to develop muscle, it is slow. The longer the muscle's under tension, the faster it's going to respond. It's going to grow. Is it going to hurt more? Yes. When you slow down the exercise to do 12 reps and do them really slow and controlled, it's going to hurt more. That's what you want. That's why you're at the gym. Those last 3 reps on that preacher bench, I got my clients, I'm spotting him, but I give him just enough. I give him just enough to keep it moving. So this feels like an eternity to get this thing up here. That's when it grows.
So what about bands then? Because that gives, Frank's, when I went into his gym, he hooks bands up on some of his machines even, and I've been doing some stuff recently with bands, and it's quite nice in terms of the tension that you get when you combine that with like a barbell and a dumbbell. And I've been experimenting with that, but have you found good results by combining bands with free weights at all? Or?
I've never used a band.
You've never? Okay.
No. But I could see the combination of the two. Don't just rely on the bands. Do your real free weights first, and then finish with the bands. I get it. That works. I mean, in a pandemic or any other situation of traveling, and that's all you have is bands, perfect. But if you have the opportunity to have real weights, free weights, the combination definitely works. Yeah, but personally, I've never used a band. Give me the barbell. You know what I mean? I just, no.
And weights versus machines then, are you still more of a free weight fan?
100%.
Why is that?
Because back in my day, we didn't have a lot of machines. We had cables and free weights. And you improvise, you create stuff, real stuff. None of this cosmetic stuff that they're doing now. No, free weights for sure. Because it forces you to concentrate harder. It forces the muscles to work harder. To stabilize the muscle has to work. Your core has to work more. It's a lot. It's hard. It's work to do. On a machine, you put the pin in. If you fail, you just drop it. You pull back machines. It doesn't give you the same muscularity or the detail in the muscles as free weights. You can tell a guy who trained with free weights for a long time because you can see the striation, the cross striation, the muscle separation, and the deepness of the muscles, and the hardness of the muscle. It shows. That guy did some real, like Beckles for one. You know, it's intense. You can see just carved out of stone. That means he did a lot of free weights.
Okay.
Machines, weight training, the guys get big, they look kind of soft. The muscles look like watery, and they don't have those real striations. We used to have striations on top of striations. You know what I mean? The pecs cut, more cuts on top of the cuts. That's what back in my day, that's what they wanted. So free weights, absolutely. And it just makes you work harder, that's all.
Yeah.
And you get faster results. Remember that.
Mr. Frank Zane, this guy was a real hero of mine when I was younger. And to be honest, he was not necessarily around at the time where I was competing. I was more Lee Haney, and Frank Zane was more of the Arnold Schwarzenegger years. He was around at a similar time to what Pumping Iron was. But when I came to America, I remember finding out that Frank Zane lived just up the road. And through a number of weird coincidences, my wife managed to meet one of the ladies that was doing his PR and get in front of him. And I believe we were one of the first people that had interviewed him since he stopped bodybuilding. I remember looking around and trying to do the research. Although he did a lot of books and writing, there was nothing about Frank on YouTube at all. And within the first year of the podcast, I went up there. I was very nervous, sat in his gym, got to meet this guy that I was just, he was a hero of mine, and managed to ask him some questions about his life. I went back again, I think about a year after, and we had a slightly different conversation, went a little bit deeper, talked about mindset and meditation and visualization. That was a really interesting interview. And then pre-pandemic, we contacted him again, and we wanted to see if we could do another interview. But I don't think his health was particularly great at that time, and he was very concerned with COVID, and so he said, look, I can't see anybody at the moment. So after a lot of perseverance, he agreed that we could go up and see him this year, early on in this year. And I wanted to talk to him just about fitness and training. A lot of the other interviews were about his life story and about his mindset. But this time I wanted to go up there and really break down his nutrition, his supplementation, his training methods. And he also agreed to take me around and actually do a training session with me, which is an absolute sort of highlight of my year. So he's an absolutely wonderful guy, got a very interesting view on life and training, and he still to this day trains clients in his home gym just outside San Diego. And just developed a really nice friendship with a wonderful man. So I hope you enjoy this clip with Mr. Frank Zane. So I wanted to start with diet then. So imagine that you're, I guess, sort of starting from scratch, and I suppose using some of the, using some of the programs when you were, competing yourself. What would you say are some of the fundamentals in terms of your diet? I'm not talking about right up to the competition, but just more sort of like off season. What were some of the essentials that you did, whether it's foods that you ate, and to sort of keep you in shape all year round?
One of the most important things I learned is not to get fat in the off season. Like in December, don't get into eating junk food and a lot of things that aren't going to help you physically. So those months like December, January, February, I would specialize on weak points and not get out of shape. Still stay in shape, but I mainly focus on areas I needed to improve. And then when I got closer to when I wanted to go into all-out training, I would, still be doing that, but basically training more overall and practicing posing and taking more photos and getting the whole package together. I think that I learned that don't get out of shape in the off season. If you do, if you do get out of shape, you can lose a lot of time getting back there. So stay where you're at. And for me, I learned not to bulk up. Don't do that. It just meant getting fatter than having to lose that. That's just time lost. I try to stay lean in the off season.
Right. And what was your, in terms of protein, carbs, fats, did you have a certain amount of protein and high, low carbs? What did that look like?
I would restrict carbohydrates as I got closer to competition. Typically, I would get a little bit more than 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So let's say I was training at 200 pounds of body weight. I would get maybe 240 grams of protein a day, spread throughout the day. Fish, poultry. I did eat a lot of red meat in those days, red meat that didn't have a lot of fat attached to it. Carbohydrates, I usually kept my carb intake about half of my protein intake or less. So let's say I was eating 240 grams of protein a day, I was getting under 100 grams of carbs a day, just enough to get a pump. I could tell if I wasn't getting enough carbs because I wouldn't get a good pump. And so I tried to get more of that earlier in the day, mainly from vegetables and some fruits. I wouldn't drink fruit juice and I wouldn't eat, fast foods. And fats, I really never went on a real low-fat diet. I still ate cheese, but I wasn't heavily into fats. And so my calories, I'd say probably under 2,000 a day.
Right.
And that worked for me.
And what when you had carbs, what were the carbs that you used to have?
From fruits and vegetables.
Right.
Maybe grapefruit, apples, any kind of fruit really, but not overdoing it. Maybe 1 piece of fruit a day, maybe 2 at the most. But mostly vegetables, fresh vegetables like salad. Occasionally I'd have a baked potato or yam. And I just kept it down. I didn't let my carbohydrate intake exceed my protein intake ever. And then the fat intake was usually about 50, 60 grams of fat a day. Most of it coming from the protein.
Right. And what with the sort of timings then? What did the typical day look like? Breakfast. How many times did you eat, and when did you sort of start and stop eating?
I ate probably 4 to 6 times a day. There were some extreme times, like in 1976. I was eating 7 meals a day, and each meal was basically a combination of protein and carbohydrates with a little bit of fat so that I can ingest a lot of capsules, mainly amino acids in free form. And I got incredible that year. I mean, I really got defined. I mean, it was incredible the way I looked that year.
Why did you have so many more frequent meals in that year?
Well, to get all the capsules down.
Right, okay.
Maybe 7 feedings. Actually, I got up, and I don't recommend this for anybody, but I was very much an experimenter in those days. I would probably ingest 80 to 100 capsules each time I ate.
Each time?
Uh-huh. And so I would get close to 600 to 700 capsules a day. But it worked. I figured if I can find a way to get this down without, what's the worst that could happen? Well, you can get bloated, you can get diarrhea, you can get nauseous. So avoid that. Do it in such a way the food acts as a matrix. You can't just take a lot of capsules or pills. That upsets your stomach. You have to buffer it with food that acts as a matrix to hold the capsules together. And, especially in 1976, I did that. I mean, I got in great shape that year, but I did it ever since. I still do it, but nowhere near the extreme I did then.
Hmm. So when was your first meal then? When you how soon did you eat from when you woke up?
Right away.
Right.
Usually you'd have maybe 3 soft-boiled eggs and a piece of whole grain toast and about 1/4 of an avocado and some grated cheese. And then for lunch I would have maybe a fish salad. And then for dinner I would have red meat with a vegetable or a salad. And then before I went to bed, I would have usually a piece of fruit, maybe a grapefruit with amino acids. And I took the amino acids throughout the day. That really helped. Because there you're getting the effects of having protein that's been digested without any calories. Think about that. And so I took more and more.
That doesn't sound like a lot of food, to be honest.
It's probably not according to what some people are doing these days, but I wasn't that big.
Yeah.
The most I weighed in the off season was maybe 198 pounds. And so I kept the feeding small. I wanted to keep my waist small, and I did a lot of abdominal work too. I never did a lot of aerobics, although I did do some at certain times, especially. Like the program that worked the best for me was in '79 when I was in Palm Springs. I would go to the track. I used to go track and run 6 laps at night. And my legs got really good from doing that. So I found that if I took my time and did everything in pace, I could avoid extremes. If you have to go to extremes right before you show, you're going to lose something. You can't count on that. You can do it, but you're always going to lose something.
So when you went kind of like came to like the month before competition, then did you have to change your food and that too much, or was that, was it?
Not a lot.
No.
I tried to do it gradually. I would just cut down on my carbs and fats, keep the protein up. And one thing too is I stopped drinking milk or using milk products the last month because milk has female hormones, and certain bodybuilders I knew, they're always sort of smooth, but they looked impressive. I called them milk-fed champions. And I realized that wouldn't work for me.
Because they were smooth, they weren't defined.
They weren't as defined as I would like to be.
Right.
So I realized that might be okay, like using a milk egg protein might be good, was good. I did it right up until last month, and then I just went to taking more amino acids.
Right. So what about supplements? You talk about amino acids. What type of amino acids did you have, and was there anything else that you used to take alongside those?
Yeah. I would take amino acids. At the time I was using Real Blair products. And since then I went to another brand because he's not around anymore. They were good. I use Monteith products now. They're in Los Angeles. And they have 16 amino acids in them. And sometimes I'll take extra arginine and extra glutamine, but usually not. Sometimes extra tryptophan, but usually not. At night I take maybe 10 milligrams of melatonin just to initiate sleep. I have no problem falling asleep, but I sort of get into sleep and have some nice dreams with that. And then I take a B-complex, multiple formula. I take Megazyme, which is a protein digestant that digests protein, fat, and carbohydrates. I take 2 every time I eat. I take oils. I used to take lecithin. I don't anymore, but I take germ oil concentrate. And if I were going to train for something to get in peak condition, I would take more of everything.
Right.
I would, but now I don't. I mainly take a bunch of stuff in the morning with breakfast, and that's it. I might take something later in the afternoon when I eat, but not much.
Right. So when you was in that shape, like Olympia side, was there any other sort of extra hormones or anything like that you used to get into that condition?
I never relied on any of that stuff. I wanted to get that effect from supplements.
Yeah.
And when you take high doses of supplements, of vitamins, minerals, enzymes, amino acids, you do get a drug-like effect.
Really?
But it's not as radical. Plus, there are none of the side effects. Like one of the side effects of using anabolic steroids is your temperament changes. Your personality changes. People start hating you and avoiding you because you're like a bull out of a cage. So I didn't want any of that.
What about as you get older? Like I know it's quite popular now, certainly around here, like the testosterone replacement. So replacing what you've lost as you've got older. What do you think about that?
I did it for a while, but I haven't done it in a long time because, one of the things about testosterone is cancer feeds on testosterone.
Really?
If you have a tendency, and men have a tendency to get prostate cancer as they get older.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to encourage that. So I don't take any of that stuff. No hormones. Good. And hold it for about a count of 15. That's it. Just relax into the stretch.
After each reset then your...
Right, you want to do a stretch, some kind of stretch for the body part. Working your chest, your shoulders, and your triceps, especially your front deltoids. Good. It's nice having a machine like this to do it on.
It's a nice stretch, actually.
Yeah.
How old is this machine then, Frank?
Oh, I've had this for about, I don't know, 20, 30 years.
That still works pretty well.
Oh, it's great. These machines get better as they get older because they wear in. Great.
I wonder if they'll ever make equipment with these bands on.
It'd be possible. Very not that hard to do. Good.
Doing good, Frank?
You're doing fine. How about one more?
Do you ever do like different types of curls, like hammer curls, or you just mainly stick to the machines?
I do a lot of different stuff.
Right.
You know, machines are part of that.
Yeah.
I might do dumbbell concentration curl, alternate dumbbell curl. But you know, these days I usually just do this. If it's 2 days, I do upper body, 1 day, legs and abs the next. 3 days, I do pulling muscles, legs, pushing muscles. Push it out and lock it up. Very good.
About abs, what would you do for those?
Well, for abs, it's the old standard leg raise. Yeah, like that. And raise from there up to here. 20 reps. Okay, you're done.
I'm done.
That's abbreviated upper body workout and a little bit of thighs too.
Can I do a set on your...
Oh, leg press? Leg blaster. Sure.
This is Frank's secret.
It's good. You could go a little slower, especially on the way down. That's better. You're counting reps?
Yeah.
Good.
That's a lightweight, but I can... it burns.
That is 70 pounds.
70 pounds. So it's light.
Yeah, relatively.
It is. It's nice
The
though.
fact that your thighs are doing work because you do it that way.
Yeah, I can really feel it without I'm out of breath as well. Without putting anything on my back.
So that's a wrap, I take it.
That's good. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. That's a great workout with the legend, Mr. Frank Zane. So I think 2021 was an interesting year for many people. I think we all thought that once the pandemic came to an end, then the world would go back to normal. But I think certainly we're seeing that there was something called a pandemic hangover. And that certainly looks as though it's going to continue for quite some time, certainly into the year ahead. But I do feel that the world is in a different place. I think the information that people have got around about what's, what from business in terms of the pandemic, I think we're all in a very, very different place. I think we're coming from a level of having a lot more information. And I think it's a year to press reset. I think we've got an opportunity to do things differently than what we've ever done before. I think new habits have been created that would have never have happened without the pandemic. And I think it gives us all an opportunity to go forward in the way that we want to go forward with, whether that's in our business, in our lives, with our relationships. I think it's almost like from my perspective, we've been given another, for those of us that are fortunate to still be here, and that's something to also be very, very grateful of. I think we've all got an opportunity to move forward, but more importantly, we're in a time and a place where your health has never been more important than ever. I think people are realizing the importance of health and wellness and fitness and recovery and sleep. And although it's great to have money and to have a business, a lot of the people that I've been fortunate to meet over the last 3 or 4 years that have had more money than what they can ever spend in their lifetime would do anything to buy health. And I think that's a message that us as a business, as an industry, as an individual needs to sort of understand and figure out how to put that and create habits to form that in our life. And if it happens to be a business of yours, to think about how that message can get out there, because there's certainly more than enough to go around. There's no need for it to be a cutthroat business. There's no need for there to be massive competition. There's so many people that need what we are providing as a health, fitness, wellness space. And I think it's probably the most exciting time where technology is in a totally different place to where it's ever been. The awareness and appreciation of health and fitness is in a very different space than where it's been. So, we with the podcast, we want to be able to uncover some of those stories and share some of that information. And we want to be able to build that within our business and help other people that we work with to be able to uncover, develop, learn, and implement some of these ideas in their lives and businesses to create a fun and enjoyable life and work and just, I guess, to sound corny, but just to make our lives and the world a little bit better than probably what it has been previously. So once again, thank you for listening, supporting, and please continue to stick with us in the year ahead. Thank you very much for listening.